Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome back to iRacing. And for the last time in 2019, for the last time in the 2010s decade, welcome to a review piece. No, this is not of a particularly new, fast, or exciting car. No, this is a little bit of a reminiscence about the biggest laughingstock to hit Formula One in the last decade. This, before your very eyes, is the McHonda. Yes, it is the McLaren MP4 from the 2015 Formula One World Championship. Designed and raced by McLaren International for the 2015 season, the MP4 heralded the return of Honda as an engine manufacturer in Formula One, and this happened to a high degree of anticipation and celebration leading up to the dawn of the 2015 championship. 2014 brought in the present turbo hybrid regulations that we still see for 2020 and even into 2021, and as far as we know, beyond up to this point. Honda decided to take another year to observe the championship, to see what the trends were in terms of design and performance, and then to stake their own entry as an engine supplier, signing up with a factory supply deal with McLaren for 2015. Taking that year to observe everything, Honda thought would give them an advantage competitively as well as on the design side to identify the trends, identify the strengths and weaknesses of the other manufacturers, and then to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak, with an advantage. Well, no, none of that ended up happening. As we all know, the MP4 and Honda, in general, turned into an absolute laughingstock and undoubtedly the biggest meme to come out of the last decade of Formula One competition. What is this car here? Well, I actually reviewed this car once before, all the way back in 2015, around the same time that it first came out for iRacing. And, of course, those of you who have driven iRacing since, undoubtedly you've had some seat time in this car. And, well, there's really no way around this, is there? It's awful. It's absolutely, horrifically terrible. And it's a bit of a dichotomy, because it is, by far, the worst Formula One car of the last 20 years that I've ever driven in sim racing. It is unbelievably horrific. It's terrifyingly poor in every aspect. But, on the flip side, it's remarkable because it's so bad, because iRacing, in making it so bad, have actually made it one of the most authentically performing cars that we have ever seen in sim racing. What am I on about? Well, here's what's going on with the MP4 Of course, it was designed and raced by McLaren International for the 2015 World Championship. It was driven by Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, and Kevin Magnussen. Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button, of course, they are world champions, 3 world championships between those two guys. Kevin Magnussen, unfortunately, he never actually managed to start the race in Australia, his one and only entrance for McLaren that year. But yes, 3 very high names in the Formula One hierarchy driving this car. Technically, and in terms of its construction, we're not really talking about anything too imaginative, anything unorthodox, really. It's a mid-2010s Formula One car. We've got the carbon fiber composite monocoque with the cockpit and survival cell molded in there. That monocoque construction out of carbon fiber, of course, par for the course basically since the mid-1980s in Formula One design. Suspension at the front, double wishbone push rod, as we can see. At the rear, it's the same, but it's a pull rod rather than a push rod. Overall length of this thing, depending on the spec that it's in, the spec that we see it here with the thumbnail nose, the overall length there was 5,070 millimeters. On launch spec with the flat plane nose there, the duckbill nose that it originally had, 5,100 millimeters in overall length. The width, 1,800 millimeters according to the regulations. The height, 950 millimeters. Wheelbase, that's the area between the axles from their center line, 3,520 millimeters. That was adjustable, plus or minus 20 millimeters. The engine, yes, it is the Honda RA615H. That's the 1.6-liter single-turbo V6 engine with the direct gasoline injection there for the fuel induction. 15,000 RPM is the rev limit on that engine. Supplementing the engine is a hybrid system consisting of motor generator unit kinetic and motor generator unit heat. That, of course, a motor run through the turbocharger as well as a motor that is run off of the rear axle, both deploying and harvesting energy there from the gearbox. It's a 8-speed plus reverse semi-automatic paddle shift unit designed in-house by McLaren. And of course, keeping all of this together electronically are a set of lithium-ion batteries designed by Honda. Fuel comes from the Exxon Mobil conglomerate in their Esso brand. Also, lubricants coming from Mobil and that Mobil 1 brand. Brakes were a Kebono brake-by-wire carbon discs, so no more mechanical connections between the brake pedal and the brake calipers, which still kind of skeeves me out, to be honest. And, of course, the tires, the Spec Pirelli compounds, the P0 for the slick dry compounds, and the Cinturato compounds for the wet conditions. Of course, the car was only ever entered by McLaren Honda in Formula One, driven by Alonso, Button, and Magnussen, as we have discussed. The car made its debut at the 2015 Australian Grand Prix, and its final race was the 2015 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It ran a couple times after that, actually in Abu Dhabi, as part of the tire test at the end of 2015 in preparation for the 2016 campaign. In all, the car entered 19 races, and out of those 19 starts, what did it do? Well, it took 0 Grand Prix victories. It took 0 podium positions. It scored 0 pole positions. And it set 0 fastest laps. Yes, we are all balls across the board in terms of the results here, and it doesn't get much better when we look at the race-by-race results here. The best result in any Grand Prix for the MP4 30 was a 5th place, courtesy of Fernando Alonso in Hungary. Unfortunately, that only happened one time. The retirements across the 2015 season, they look a little bit like this. Malaysia, double retirement for both Alonso and Button. But before that, Australia, Kevin Magnussen didn't even manage to start the race. So we are 2 retirements and a DNS. A 3rd retirement happened for Alonso in Spain. A 4th in Monaco, also for Alonso. A 5th and a 6th, a double retirement for Button and Alonso in Canada. Another double retirement, a 7th and an 8th in Austria. A 9th retirement in Britain. A 10th and 11th in Singapore. And a 12th in Mexico for Alonso. Yes. In other words, out of 19 races, the car retired 12 times, including how many double retirements? 4 double retirements. Yeah, that was the story of McLaren Honda's return season. In other words, the return of Honda to Grand Prix racing. Of course, Honda definitely were resting on their laurels when it came time to sign that supply deal with McLaren. Of course, they had that supply deal with McLaren up through 1992, culminating in 3 World Championships for Ayrton Senna, 1988, 1990, and 1991, all with Honda power there. Constructors' Championship as well with Honda in 1991 for the last time. That was set with the MP4 McLaren, also the last Constructors' Championship winning car to have a manual gearbox. So, yes, some pretty cool accolades there deserved by Honda. Later on, through the end of the 90s, they had supply deals with Jordan and with BAR. BAR later on turning into a factory Honda team for 2006, winning the Hungarian Grand Prix with Jenson Button. However, thereafter, at the end of the 2000s, it was all cataclysm for Honda. 2007 and 2008 were 2 absolutely disastrous campaigns, made all the more funny by the Earth Dreams liveried Let's Save the Whales Honda. The car had a picture of the Earth on it as its livery, devoid of all sponsorship. Otherwise, absolutely terrible. The car was so environmentally friendly that it burst into flames, seemingly at random. Fantastic. At the end of 2008, Honda pulled out their support for both of their teams in Formula One. Of course, Honda Racing was gone, and Super Aguri folded after the Spanish Grand Prix in 2008. So one team gone before the end of the season, and then the factory outfit left high and dry after Honda decided to pull out at the end of 2008, leaving everybody at their Brackley factory unemployed, including team principal Ross Brawn, who then decided to buy the ashes of the team, convinced Mercedes to give him an engine, and then promptly won the World Championship, for which Honda undoubtedly took all credit, behind the scenes, of course. So, coming back into the sport for 2015 as an engine supplier, undoubtedly they said, oh, well, this is just going to be easy. We're just going to win the World Championship again without even trying, right? Well, yes. GP2 engine. No power. much slower than before, right? Yes, well, of course. That is what we really remember this car for, and, well, does it really deserve all of this? I don't know. Criticism? Is that what I'm doing with this thing, or am I just relaying facts to you? Well, let's just take a look at all of this. Yes, the cockpit of the Mick Honda, here it is, everything turned off, and obviously this is when the car is at its best, when it's not moving and it's switched off. But when we flip the ignition on, you see immediately it's in anti-stall mode. Well, unfortunately, iRacing, although they have done a lot of work on the clutch physics, they have not yet implemented those clutch physics on the high-level open-wheeler, so IR18, FW31, and MP430 still have the fake news, fake clutch going on, so yeah, it defaults to anti-stall. But when we fire it up, cover your ears. All right, it hasn't burst into flames yet. Awesome. So, steering wheel comes alive. We've got all sorts of instrumentation here. Upper right of the steering wheel, that's our brake balance there. See, I can tick it up here. Want it to 55.7 there for the moment. That's fine. To the left, there is our crankshaft RPM. Down the left-hand side of the wheel, you see where it's 40.00. That's going to be our live delta to our previous lap. And then below that, the blue numbers there, that's going to be our last lap time. Upper right, brake balance as we discussed. Below that, we have got our deploy settings for the MGU system. Obviously, you can see what's going on there. That goes between automatic and manual there. Below that, you see the plus 30. That is the rate of charge or discharge going into or out of the battery pack. Below that, ERS, that is a numerical representation of the electrical reserve in the car. And then extreme right of the steering wheel display, you see that white column, that is a graphical representation of the remaining stated charge in the ERS battery system. We can flip the page over, and then you see a per lap deploy allotment there. We haven't turned a wheel yet, so obviously that's going to be at 0, but that'll tick up as we deploy more on that page, of course. Other things that we can play with on this car, brake balance, as we talked about. Of course, we have a pit lane speed limiter. We can also play with the throttle map settings here. So basically that's not quite a rev limiter, but it just changes the ultimate extent of the throttle travel, so you can save a little gas that way from settings 0 through 9, so you get 10 steps on that. Also, we can play with the harvest rate and the discharge rate with the MGU system. So we have 14 steps in that. The higher you go, the more efficient it gets, and the lower you go, the less efficient it gets. Obviously, step 7 of 14 is going to be correspondent to about 50%. We can also change the rate of charge from the MGU-K specifically, so higher numbers mean more harvest out the rear axle. Fine. Of course, you also have to adjust your brake bias to deal with all of that. But the McLaren Honda MP430, it gets its reputation of being terrible because it was terrible. Its on-track results speak to that. But what's it like to drive? Now, of course, I reviewed this car almost 5 years ago when it was brand new, when I didn't have the Thrustmaster DSPC wheel, when I didn't have the same levels of experience and understanding of these hybrid systems that I now have. So perhaps I can give it a little bit of a more fair shake now. Let's try. Getting it out on track here at Silverstone. Let's try and warm everything up so we can speak representatively without writing its obituary prematurely. It also should go without saying now that the last time iRacing gave us a Formula One car was 2015. Depending on where you are in the world watching this, it may or may not already be 2020. Fix this, iRacing. Anyway, getting everything up to temperature now, building up some speed. Up into 8th gear. Into cops. Make it a little easier here, but not much easier, to be honest. Through Beckett's and Beckett's. What sort of high-speed grip do we not have? Yes, understeer city already. Yes, right. Down hanger straight with the DRS deployed. 190, 192 miles an hour just about before we have to brake into stow. All right. What I want to do here is just try and do 2 or 3 flying laps and see if we can be consistent, because it's going to illustrate something. In lap number 1 here. 7th gear for the first quarter. Lots of lifting and lots of coasting. Lots of playing with the throttle and steering. Coming down into the complex. A little bit of opposite lock correction there. Into the slow stuff now. Try to get on power as hard as we can. Got a lift, and now on to the infield straight. Through the low speed stuff, coming on, there we go. Good quarter, all flat out, of course. Down the old start-finish straight, across the old starting grid, into cops, brakes. 7th gear, wait so long to get back on the power. And immediately you realize that this is a far cry from even 2017 performance, never mind 2019 performance. Anchor straight, DRS. Full hybrid system deploy. 200, yes! Got up to 201 before we got to break into stow. Lots of understeer. Final complex, waiting ages and ages to get back on the power. DRS 135, 217. All right, keep that in mind, and it'll also be displayed on the bottom of the steering wheel there. And we've already invalidated this lap because, hey, we have no consistency. But is there anything to be gained from here? You can see how much grip it doesn't have at low speed trying to get on the power. Wow, we have lost a ton of time already. And of course, we're in big time regen mode for the hybrid system, so we're not going to have all that straight line speed regardless. So immediately you can start to see that we've got some major problems with this car. Just looking at lap times. You use all of your electrical power on one flying lap, and then you lose, let's see, 1.5 seconds so far on this lap trying to get it back. And that only gets worse. As you keep trying to get it back, we're going to be more than 2 seconds lost on this lap, I do fear. Yep, 1.79 off from one lap to another, and that's really without having made my mistake right here at the previous lap. It just runs out of electricity far too quickly. Fine. You can manage your way around that to an extent. Of course, you will still lose time trying to regen more power, but yes, that is a problem straight away. Beyond that, though, what are the other problems that we have in this car? We've got to continue on this run to illustrate them some more. And right now it's still feeling reasonable, so not so much yet, but what you will see start to evolve as we continue along on this run is corner by corner the car's balance will change. And this is very strange, is it not? Well, just bear with it here and you'll start to see what I mean. We'll be able to go for it full beans on the next lap as we've managed to regen a lot of the power that we had lost. Alright, let's try to go for it. Alright, let's go. Let's try to keep it on the island. Ready to lock up there, going wide. But we can make up for it with a lot of power, can't we? Well, not really. Still, we shall try. And there's more understeer. Steal as much as we can over the curving here. Still losing time. Through cops, understeer all the way through the corner, having to wait until we're almost on the exit curves to get back on full throttle. There's understeer, more understeer. That actually turned in okay. DRS. Full hybrid deploy, gaining a little bit of time down the straight, but not much. The brakes, lots of bumps there if you go really deep into stow. On the power. Losing more time. On the brakes, locking them up, trying to get it stopped. Lost a whole ton of time in the final corner there. 136.017. All right, gained a little bit of time there through the infield. Get it stopped. Can we get it turned? Not so bad. Still a little bit of oversteer there. Trying to turn through the corner. Just not like these long corners, I'll tell you that much. Cops. Now, of course, the 2019 car will take that totally flat out. Not the case in this thing. We're out of electrical power, but we will press on. That actually wasn't bad at all through there. But we're out of electricity, so we're just going to be losing tons of time down the straight. We're able to deploy a little bit just out of the MGUH, but not much. Final quarter really hates this as well. All right, 134.938. Okay. Here's that high-speed understeer, rearing its ugly head again. And there you go. Okay, so basically, what have we observed here? We've observed some rather interesting variances in performance from one lap to another. Barring what's going on with the electrical system and the hybrid assist, you've got yourself a car that is a little bit inconsistent. Is it anything that you can't drive around? Well, to this point, no. But the way that it handles under braking, I mean, you could not adjust the brake bias at all, and then suddenly it's locking the front axle, or it's locking the rear axle, or when you're mid-corner and you're trying to get back on the throttle, sometimes you have power and sometimes you don't have power. Again, that has to do with the hybrid system to an extent. Through here, sometimes it hooks up, other times it doesn't. In other words, what I mean by hooking up is sometimes the front end will react, and other times it doesn't do anything you want. So ultimately, it leads you to have a package that is unpredictable. And something that's unpredictable is not going to be something that you have a whole lot of confidence in. If you don't have a lot of confidence in what's underneath you, you can't build consistency. And if you can't build consistency, you don't have reliable performance. In other words, we're fundamentally lacking here what I call a stable platform. In other words, it's an unknown variable, lap by lap. I don't entirely know what the car is going to do lap by lap, or even corner by corner sometimes. if you're trying to be consistent and if you're trying to have pace over long runs, it's just not going to do it. That's fundamentally bad. Through here, having to back out of it in high-speed corners. This is a Formula One car. It's supposed to do high-speed corners flat out. It just doesn't. Then through here, with the weight transfer going on, picking up oversteer there at well over 100 miles an hour, that's not fun. Not in the least. Seventh gear and braking all the way through Copse. Watch the pole position lap for the 2019 British Grand Prix and just look at the apex speed there. Well over 200 miles an hour through a 90-degree corner. I mean, you know, that's what Formula One should do. Yes, a lot of that is a byproduct of the rules package that we had for 2015 and, of course, 2014 through 2016. Absolutely the worst rules package Formula One has ever had. They were legitimately slower than IndyCar on quite a few circuits, if you could do a one-to-one comparison. They had no downforce and they had no mechanical grip because the tires were comically small, meaning that the overall level of performance was something that was more akin either to IndyCar or even Formula 2, which was an absolute abomination as far as Formula One was concerned. On top of that, remember that these V6 turbo hybrid engines, and I'm about to lose 80 subscribers at least with this next comment, these V6 turbo hybrid engines sound like elephants getting murdered. You start to understand that, yes, this was not a very attractive package. So all of that definitely led Formula One to get the 2017 rules package together, which was an absolute triumph. And of course, we basically have the same regulations through 2019 and 2020. So that's good. The cars became instantly 5 seconds a lap faster, and they've gotten faster ever since, which again is good. However, even with all of that, even with all of the hindrances that this rules package gave to the teams in designing these cars, Mercedes in that time was winning 16 out of 19, 20 races, so they were doing really well. Red Bull were also winning races through 2014 to 2016. Ferrari were winning races in 2015. They were absolutely nowhere in 2014 and 2016, but they were in the mix at least for 1 year. So it wasn't all the rules. It was McLaren as well, and it was Honda as well. When Fernando Alonso very famously got on the radio at Suzuka and made his GP2 engine comment, he wasn't just making that up. As we talked about the 11 retirements that this car suffered out of 19 races, you know, it's bad. And it had to be very disheartening for a double world champion like Fernando Alonso to be sitting in a McLaren, to be sitting in a car designed by the second most successful team in Grand Prix history, and to be retiring every other day, and to be finishing out of the points on all the days that you're not retiring. So it had to be absolute torture for this guy. And I'm totally beginning to understand why. As this run has evolved, even though we're on very low fuel, what has started to happen, and now you can really see it starting to settle in, the car just breaks free at very inopportune and very unexpected moments. You can't really attack the racetrack. You try to get back on the power and you just immediately lose the rear end. You spin up the tires. You don't have the confidence to attack the racetrack at all. Honestly, understeer through high-speed corners like this, it just shouldn't be. So I'm getting understeer through medium and high-speed corners. The low-speed stuff honestly feels okay, but as okay as it can feel because the tires are about the size of, I don't know, fleas. So that's not something we can deal with. But medium and high-speed instability, that's something we can deal with. I feel like I have enough aero grip, but I don't feel like I have the weight distribution here. I mean, look at that. You know, no change in steering angle at all, and it just washes farther and farther out. So we've got some setup issues to deal with here, right? Weight distribution. So that's where I want to look next. Okay. We'll just get it stopped in the pit lane here. Shut it down. And we'll just take a look here through the setups and see what's going on. As we see it gracefully returning, sputtering its way back to its box. Yes, hoping that it doesn't have to turn another lap, but we're not quite finished yet. And all in all, it doesn't look all that terrible, does it? I mean, it's not a bad livery, and the car itself, design-wise, it doesn't look awful as far as the 2015 cars go, because they were all hideous. But what do we have here setup-wise? Aero screen here. Obviously, we've got our tire pressures, and then we have just our macrocosmic aerodynamic settings with the overall package there. Eye downforce, front flap, and the rear wing wicker there. Fine. All conventional. The chassis side. Now, this is where things get interesting. I feel like I fundamentally have a weight distribution problem. I don't feel like I quite have enough weight over the front axle because I want to get that bite through the front tires because I'm dealing with a lot of understeer, right? Problem is, if I try to deal with this aerodynamically, we hit a wall because, right, I can add a little bit more to the front wing, but not all that much. So it's almost max there. It's on setting 12 of 15. Fine. And quite honestly, the aero feels okay. So I don't really want to touch that. So the chassis side. Weight distribution is something that is heavily regulated in Formula One. You can't have a 50-50 weight distribution, and even if it were legal, it's very difficult to achieve simply because of the way the cars are laid out. All your heavy bits are in the middle and toward the rear, and you're only allowed a certain amount of ballast in the car. So 50-50 weight distribution is difficult to achieve statically. However, there is a workaround here. There's a little physics hack that we can deal with to try and get that closer to 50-50 dynamically. And we can do that with ride height. You'll notice that almost all the Formula One cars for the last 5 years or so have been running with a lot of rake. So in other words, the front ride height is much lower than the rear ride height. There are two reasons for this. The first one is aerodynamics. The front is far lower than the rear. So as the air passes through the front section of the car, particularly underneath the T-tray down there right under the cockpit, it's forced through that very narrow slot gap between the bottom of the floor and the road. So you force the air through that narrow slit opening, it's going to accelerate. This pressure is going to increase, which also increases drag. But as the air passes through the bottom of the car there, it encounters the bottom surface of the floor, which slopes upward relative to the ground as the ride height starts to go up toward the rear. What this does is it actually creates a very crude ground effect. It makes the whole bottom of the car a diffuser, right? So as the ride height goes up at the rear and the angle of the floor starts to become more severe, the distance between the bottom of the floor and the ground starts to increase as you travel rearward down the longitudinal axis of the car. The air slows down and it expands to fill that void, right? Because you don't have a vacuum in the area where the air hasn't hit yet. So what that does is the air expands, its speed drops, and its pressure decreases. That creates an overall suction underneath the car, creating downforce. Again, it's a crude ground effect that they're able to achieve with the floor and with the ride height via rake. It's also why they have these vortex generators across the front wing there, the end plates. So the outwash actually has much more to do with the rear of the car than it has to do with tire wake. Don't let, the Will Buxtons of the world try to tell you otherwise. Anyway, we have a fundamental weight distribution problem. How do we fix this? We try to do it with ride height. The way that we deal with ride height on this car is that we can adjust the preload of the torsion bar. This torsion bar offset parameter here. If I manipulate this, I can lower the front ride height. And conversely, I can raise the front ride height. So whatever I do with this, whether I raise or lower the front ride height, it's going to affect the corner weights here on either side of the car. You can see that the corner weights are symmetrical left to right. So I've got 371 pounds here on the left front. I've got 371 pounds on the right front. Conversely, at the rear, there is weight bias toward the rear, of course. So I've got 427 pounds on the left and right rear. Now, if I want to get some of that dynamic weight forward over the front axle, what I need to do is to lower the front ride height. Makes sense. However, I try to do that, and immediately what we start to do is, well, we're going to run afoul of rules in terms of setting this thing up. If I want to run this symmetrically here at 1.05 inches front ride height, and the rear ride height is here just over 4 inches, so marked difference there, you can see that we are too low. Our spring deflection there, the heave spring, is too low, and it will not let me validate this setup to go out on track. Right. So how do we do this? How do we fix this? Well, we can play with our offsets here, our heave perch offsets, right? Can we? Well, playing by leaps and bounds here, and it doesn't appear to be giving me much. No, it's not. Even if I could run this, look at what we've done. We've only moved 1 pound of weight around front relative to rear. So this isn't really working very much, is it? Not particularly. I can play with the heave springs. I can really soften that heave spring down. I can remove the heave spring even, and it's not going to do anything. So what have we got? I've got a car with a weight distribution problem. I've got a car with ballast all the way cranked over to the front, and it's not working. I can't do it. I can move that ballast rearward if I want. Doesn't do anything with our spring deflection there. So I've got a car with a weight distribution problem that I can't solve, and I can't deal with it setup-wise to try and trick the laws of physics. So how do we fix this problem? We don't. Quite honestly, that is about as good as it's going to get, which is the setup that we started with. I can play with the heave perch offset here more and more to try and raise that spring deflection so that I can then lower this ride height. However, it's still not quite going to give me what I need in terms of the weight distribution that I want. I want to get this as close to equalized as possible front to rear. Again, I'm trying to get this as close as I can to 50-50. And again, you're never going to get perfect 50-50, but that is what I want to try and get this car to behave normally. Again, getting the front ride height manipulated to the point where we can move some weight around, it's still not doing what I need. I can continue to try and play with that perch offset there on the heave spring. As you can see, it's raising the front ride height even more. So then I can play with the torsion bar offset here to try and crank this up or down to get the weight over that front axle. I could do this all day long. Again, just trying to get as close as possible to 50-50. Let's set this to -1 inch left and right. And we're going to fall afoul of the setup parameters again. But no matter what I do, it all tries to default back to 370 at the front and 430 at the rear. It's just the car's natural weight distribution, and now our ride height at the front is far too high, right? So now we have a fail on 3 parameters rather than 1. So it leaves us with the conclusion of having a car with a fundamental problem in terms of drivability that we just can't seem to fix, right? So ultimately, what this does for us is it creates a situation that we can't get out of. It creates a car that is fundamentally wrong in terms of its driving dynamics with understeer and oversteer. And the more we try to fix it, the farther and farther away we get from a legal setup. So it leaves us with running the baseline setup that we had, for the most part, which is no good because I have the same issues that we started with because it's the same setup, right? So ultimately, we're left with the same situations that we had previously. We just don't have the performance. It's okay when the tires are brand new and when we're on low fuel. But if you're on heavy fuel or the tires start to wear out or both, ultimately you're left with trying to chase this thing around to the ends of the earth, and it just never gets any better. Which leads you to say things like, amazing, much slower than before, right? So it's a lose-lose situation, and it's just not fun. And just lighten the tires up there before they're even warmed up. Does it really matter, though? Not particularly. Even more opposite lock required. Look at that. That's awful. Yeah, big twitches like that we can do without, thank you. More regen happening. All right, let's try to really attack. Nope. I just say attack and the thing twitches. Come on, Mick Honda. Work with me here. Come on, give me power. Give me grip. Give me any semblance of stability. Can you at least give me one good corner? No, you can't, can you? Come on. Ride the curves. There you go. That's a good little mistake. Good. Right. Come on. That was a weird little weight transfer moment there. Aha, yep. All right, well, that was better. I think that's only because, though, a little bit of practice effect has set in. Jesus. It's just doing so many things that a Formula One car shouldn't be doing. Like big attitude changes mid-corner in high-speed corners. That just should not be. Yet there it is. I mean, when cars like these are at full speed, they're generating many times their own static weight in equivalent downforce numbers, right? So, for example, if the car weighs 1,000 pounds, you know, it's going to weigh 3,000 pounds, for example, you know, and who knows what the actual numbers really are in terms of the aero, because they would never tell us, because why would Formula One ever share information with the fans? But, you know, it does not stand to reason that you'd have a car generating far more than its physical weight in aero grip in a high-speed corner, and it just starts to snap out at the rear. It just doesn't compute. But there it is. This car does it all day long. And ultimately what it creates is a very bad situation for the driver because, again, you don't have the confidence. You just don't believe that it's going to grip. When I drive a car like the Formula Hybrid cars or even the SF70H over on Assetto Corsa, we talk about having to trust the aero and trust the tire. You can't do that in this. There is no assurance at the end of the day that this car is going to be there to help you. If anything, you can only be assured of the fact that you're going to have to come in and use whatever skill you have to correct the car doing whatever scary thing it can think to torment you with next. It's just not there performance-wise. It doesn't have the stability. It doesn't have the consistency. It's even outclassed by the Williams FW31 from 2009, right? So even in iRacing, this is the latest Formula One car, and it's slower than the older one, even though superficially they both look quite similar. And this one actually has more horsepower, by the way. This thing's putting out about 950 horsepower. That FW31's putting out about 750, 800. Yeah, I mean, you can be somewhat consistent for a little while, but then you've got to back off because you can see here it's, first of all, oversteering like crazy, again, inexplicably, and it's out of power, so you got to now spend the next couple of laps doing your regen, which, by the way, is accomplished in most settings simply by backing out of the throttle. So, you know, we're using about 80% throttle here, and we're doing some regen. You can get into 100% throttle in the higher gears, and it'll continue to do regen. And then, of course, it will regen on the brakes, or if you lift and coast. But it just rubs me the wrong way. It really, really does. Yeah, almost saved it, and then you can't save it. I wanted to go into the pits anyway, but there it is. The MP430 has to give us its parting piece. It's embarrassing. Like amateurs. Turn it off, because unlike other sim racing experiences, the only thing that I can say to a car like this at a time like this is I don't want. No way. Yes, just sit there and then teleport back into your static position there, Mr. MP430, you abomination that you are. Yeah, there it is. It is still the worst car I've ever driven in sim racing as far as open wheelers are concerned. It just does nothing that you would expect it to do other than suck. And, of course, if you know the story of the MP430, then you know how much it sucks. And because it sucks so much, it means that iRacing did a great job. But it's no fun to drive. It's outclassed by the old Williams, which at this point is 10 years old in real years. And it's just, ugh. It doesn't, I mean, it goes very well. I will say, when you put the pedal down, when you're in a gear that's not first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, it goes very well. It doesn't stop very well. Or maybe I should say it does stop very well, provided you don't hit the brakes very hard. It'll go even better when you have the electrical power, but it'll only go better for like a lap or two, and then you got to, regain all the power that you've used because, hybrid. And then if you want it to turn, just, it'll turn very well as long as it's in a straight line, right? So it's bad. It's real bad, and it's an old car at this point. And I just had to take a look at this thing one more time, a little bit more informally, yet at the same time being more informed in my own right, because last time I looked at this thing with all of you was 2015 when it had first come out, and I just didn't have the same sort of experience with it. But now understanding how it works and understanding what I would like to do with it, and now realizing that I can't do with it what I would like to do with it, I realize that it's just a fundamentally flawed package. And that when you listen through the YouTube clips of Fernando Alonso's team radio in 2015 saying GP2 engine and things like that, he's not lying. He's not just making this up to be dramatic. It's very real frustration that he was feeling with this car, and, well, there it is. It doesn't do what I want. Other people that I've talked to who have driven the car extensively say the same thing. It's just an utter disaster in every respect. The engine power is great, but you can only use it for half a lap. And then the chassis dynamics, forget it. I mean, the IR18 is actually comparable lap time-wise on some tracks because it just doesn't have the high-speed grip. The IR18, even though it's down by like 350 horsepower, has better chassis dynamics than this. And it actually means better lap times a lot of the time. So, be that as it may, that is the McLaren MP430, and on today, the last day of the 2010s decade, I just thought it was appropriate to take one final look at the biggest failure to come from Formula One in the past 10 years. There it is. Feast your eyes on its magnificent ugliness. The MP430 from McLaren, as seen on TV. Anyway, stay tuned for the hot laps, everybody. Got hot laps coming here from external as well as cockpit replay, so take a look at all of that and listen to that terrible engine and all of its utter garbageness. And yes, last day of the decade, guys. What can I say? It's been absolutely crazy. 2010s have been a crazy time for motorsport. Lots of change, lots of transformation, lots of ups and lots of downs, and lots of uncertainty for the years ahead in terms of the overall trajectory of things. But there it is. And this, now I think we can finally consign this thing to the history books of being an experimentation in the world of weird and miserable failures. But please, do stay tuned for the hot laps. And of course, before signing off here, I would like to wish all of you a very happy new year and to extend my thanks to all of you for sticking with me for the last 10 years of this channel. Again, we started this in 2009, so this has been the first full decade of Ferrari Man 601, and I don't know, I'm still having fun doing this, and if I have an excuse to play with lame and broken old Formula One cars on the internet, I guess I'll continue doing this for a little while. But again, I'd like to thank all of you for your support, and of course, I'd like to wish all of you a very happy New Year 2020, if it's not already 2020. For you watching this, wherever you happen to be in the world. Stay tuned for the hot laps, everybody. Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you so much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.